Hey guys, welcome back to the park, which is now officially called Cydonia Hills. And I want to talk about this a little bit, and also a couple of other things which I did post in the description of the last video but didn't actually talk about in the video itself. So first of all, I want to talk about the name change for a little bit. This park was called Raptorland in the series, but I decided to call it Cydonia Hills in the end, since the original save game was called Cydonia Hills, which was just a project name. I was listening to Knights of Cydonia when I had to save this park, just because I had to save it to open it later, and I really didn't want to spend too much time on it at the time, so just quickly saved it under Cydonia Hills. But since it's been added to the game on the Steam release, which is really awesome, but yeah, since that happened, it's basically become known as Cydonia Hills, and I didn't quite like the Raptorland name anyway, so ditched that in favor of Cydonia Hills. But yeah, that's why there's a bit of confusion when it comes to that. And also another thing I want to quickly say is I want to thank Gordon a lot for giving me the music files of the game, so I can use them as background music for these videos, because I was pretty cheap when I bought Parkitect at first and didn't buy the soundtrack tier, so I couldn't really use the soundtrack to make videos with, but then Gordon actually offered to give me the soundtrack just for the videos, so that's why we can actually listen to it in the videos now. And there's also one other thing, basically up to this point, all of these videos have been recorded quite a long time ago, and it's about 2 months ago at this point, which is a really long time, and a very long time too before the Steam version of the game was actually released. This park was made initially for the trailers, so the Imagineer and the Big Brother trailers and other stuff that might be coming down the pipe as we speak. So it's been quite a while since I was making this, and I only very recently got back into it. Hence also why this park was unfinished when you got it into Parkitect, if you have the Steam version of the game. And hence also why there's quite a time gap between me making this section of the park and the second half of the park that I'm going to start making in the second half of this video. So that's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, to actually talk about this part of the park for a little bit, I wanted to make the Roman section of the park in this episode, not really because I have any sort of planning for it. I mean, I really don't even have any kind of planning for this entire park, and I'm just making stuff up as I go along and just testing all sorts of stuff. And I really felt like I wanted to test the Roman theme, since it seemed pretty feasible with all of the different pillar and detail items that were in the game at this point, and it just seemed like a rather easy thing to do, since you don't need any specific details to really make it happen, and hence also why I wanted to build it like this and set up this general area in a quite grid-like way, much like the Forum Romanum, which I took quite some inspiration from, to have this gravitron, well no, it's not a gravitron, that's the RCT name for it. It's like this French thing which I can't pronounce, but the sort of triple top spin, which is a really awesome but confusing ride. But it's also really large, and I felt it would be best to also have like this large facade as an arm really around the ride, much in a Forum Romanum kind of way as you had on the old plaza in the center of ancient Rome, and hence also why the buildings are somewhat inspired by it. The first temple kind of building was just heavily inspired by the Temple of Saturn in the Forum in Rome. And there will also be a small basilica type building, and there's of course the very Roman gallery which runs alongside the ride, just to make it all feel a little bit more urban rather than just having trees all around it. And yeah, I just felt like I wanted to do it that way. I also want to keep as little space open with just trees and general foliage in the park, but fill it as much as I can with rides, paths and buildings, which is also more or less part of the aesthetic that I'm trying to get in this park, where it's not entirely a realistic park. I'm completely leaving out the more realistic park layouts, to be honest, and some of the realism aspects, like actually having backs to all of these buildings and backstage areas, or a more realistic way of just making general areas, because I also want to keep that sort of old roller coaster tycoon, or theme park world, if you even will, sort of appeal to the look of this park. So I actually took a lot of inspiration also from the old Roller Coaster Tycoon scenarios and some of the ways that the Six Flags parks in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 are laid out as well. And I know I've been making the comparison with Roller Coaster Tycoon a lot when I talk about this game, but it's just something where I don't feel it's a complete copy of it. It definitely isn't, and it's got many unique aspects as well, but it's just, it has a certain similar appeal, and at least to me, I feel that, I don't know, there's just a certain value of nostalgia when I play this game, and it's also why I felt it would be quite nice to make a park which in a way sort of recreates, or tries to recreate, this vibe that the old Roller Coaster Tycoon games had. Because truth be told, they're just my favorite games of all time, and I'm actually really happy with how much this game is actually living up to it at this point. So as much as I may make it sound like a rip-off sometimes, I think for me especially, it's kind of a compliment to the game as well. Anyway, moving on, I was actually originally planning to have a Japanese area where I just made that bit of terraforming, but I won't actually do it. I'm going to move the Japanese area actually a bit further down the park to make some room for a larger Roman area than what I was planning at the moment here. Because I don't really know too many other different themes for the park, so I'm going to go with a Alpine theme and the Roman theme, which I already have, then have a slightly larger Japanese theme than I was originally planning, and then one part of the park is still left open for a different theme, which I'm not really sure entirely what I'm going to try for that. And it's going to be pretty tough to come up with something as well that'll be quite simple and still using all of the vanilla pieces but still be a very recognizable theme. But that's something to really worry about in the past. And also to make the park actually live up to its name, because it's now called Cydonia Hills. I should probably also incorporate a few more hills than I've currently been doing, because it doesn't really make much sense to have a park called Cydonia Hills without any hills. So that's also something I want to get into a little bit more. I also feel I'll probably get a bit better at the game while I work my way through this park, and especially the isometric way of looking at it and making a park, because there isn't quite so much there isn't quite so much interaction between different heights and levels, so there aren't really many paths going over each other, or coasters diving underneath paths and going over them. There's not a lot of terraforming in the park at the moment, and that's also something that I do want to get into a little bit further, because really terraforming and having all of these parts of the park just go over and underneath each other just makes it look more interesting, since you're viewing it from an isometric perspective, and it's just something that I haven't really been getting into so far in the series, aside from just having these small elements like the exit paths of the chess wing and the carousel go over different paths, and having that small river alongside the main street. But I think there's still a lot more that I can do in that respect and actually make it a bit more interesting from the isometric perspective in that way. So that's something I want to get into. Also, I have actually seen many people get some troubles running this park in Parkitect, and that's probably something I should address, because the frame rate when you open this park is not that great. It isn't for me, but it also apparently isn't for many people playing the game. And I've actually googled the park and found quite a number of people actually complaining about low FPS when you play this park. And I do also have to say that the developers originally also said that this was quite a good park to test the performance of the game with, since there's such a, pretty bad level of detail in this park, where there's especially so much grass and small rock pieces everywhere. But yeah, precisely because of that, it doesn't really run very well. And I think the main culprit is the grass, which has also been slightly changed since, like, the grass disappears if you zoom out a little, but still the performance of this park isn't that great at this point, and should also definitely improve, probably as the game develops, because it's still an alpha. But yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. If you do open this park, or at least the unfinished state at the moment in your game, it's gonna not run very well, probably, just because there's quite a high level of detail in the park. Now that said, this is the second half of the video, so it's been nearly, I think it's been nearly 2 months, I think it's been 6 weeks since I last worked on it, where I got back to the park yesterday, and I'm working on it again. And this is when I also wanted to add some extra details, because as you can see, this is the first time I am actually working on this park in the alpha. So there's a bunch of new stuff and also some new planters and things like that. Also special thanks for actually making the planters possible to be placed on paths, because that was one of my requests actually, and it got put in the game, which is really cool. So yeah, I'm actually gonna probably get back to a lot of the planter stuff and add some extra detail to the park, to the parts of the park which I've already built, because there's just a bit more detail to be added, just sprucing up the path a little bit by adding some extra little scenery items on them, like some small planters and stuff like that, to make it look a little bit more interesting than just the empty paths which I currently have. But aside from that, not too many big changes are there, and I'm not sure what coaster types I'll really get to in the rest of the park, because as I said, there is no planning whatsoever in this park, and I'm really just winging it, and truth be told, not even playing it that seriously either. It's just mostly enjoying and just kind of playing it for fun here. So I'm not really sure if I'll get into the most new attractions and the recent additions to the game when it comes to coaster types. But yeah, we'll see in the future really, because I have no exact plans for coasters to be added in the future. So yeah, the fact that I'm playing in the new alpha now doesn't really make too much of a difference to the rest of the park generally, aside from just the couple extra bushes and planters and stuff like that. Though I think I might want to make a B&M inverted coaster in the Japanese area, because that seems like a lot of fun and something that would work really well with the theme and terraforming as well. Because terrain coasters are just one of my favorite types of coasters, or if not my favorite. It's not really a type, but terrain inverts are really amazing, so I might get into that in the Japanese theme. But then again, I have no idea quite yet what I'm gonna do with that eventually. In the rest of the Roman area though, and I'm really just quickly finishing this small path over here. It was really like a little forest area, and originally I intended it as a transition between the future Japanese area and the rest of the Roman area which I had. But now I figured the Roman area is pretty small, so I might as well extend it a bit, make that street more part of the area, and add another pretty large section of the Roman area with a new ride. And that's what I wanted to talk about, because I am adding a log flume over here, which is also very Escape from Pompeii-ish type of thing, and it's quite standard at this point to have a classical theme with log flume or other types of water rides, but I just felt it would work pretty well with the Roman theme here, and just be a very good occasion to try and mess around with different types of facades and making this large blob of scenery for the log flume to interact with, and also have a nice little walkway boulevard type thing with the paths alongside this small lake that the log flume creates, and have some Roman buildings alongside that to have a bit more interaction with the water and the paths and the log flume itself, as well as the scenery around it. So yeah, that's the general idea of this, though it can probably be boiled down to being a rip-off of Escape from Pompeii, if you will. It's also going to be most resembling a real theme park area, I think, since it doesn't just take a lot of inspiration from Escape from Pompeii. I think it also resembles the Atlantica Super Splash area a little bit in the general way it's laid out, and perhaps also the area next to Furious Baco in Portaventura, in having that walkway alongside the water with all these Italian-like buildings alongside it. And it's going to be quite an open area with having that lake in the middle, and it's definitely going to be one of the, if not the most heavily themed parts of the park so far, and I won't actually be able to completely finish it in this episode. I'll just be working on the string of buildings alongside this part of the lake, and then get into the large rock with all sorts of facades that the log flume itself goes through at the top of the lift hills in the next episode, and also some other facades, and probably the transition into the Japanese area, though I'm not entirely sure if I'll actually be able to have enough time left to start work on the Japanese area in the next episode already. So I'll probably be just tying up the loose ends of the Roman area in the next episode, and maybe make a quick start on the Japanese part of the park. Also, the buildings on this string of facade are really unplanned and not with any type of central idea or function, so they're really just there to create a general atmosphere and make it all come together. but not really with any specific type of function. I might make a restaurant of this building specifically, though. It's very restaurant-ish. It's also a lot more, I should say there is a bit of a very subtle difference in the two parts of the Roman area, because obviously the Roman area really consists of two main squares almost, with a sort of connecting street between them. And the older part is really much more like the Forum Romanum, with having the temples and more of the like official Roman architecture. And the newer part with the log flume is a little bit more like just some smaller houses. I still want to just keep some of the temple-like designs in there, because they're generally the most recognizable kind of Roman architecture, and probably also most feasible to do with the items currently in the game. But there's I feel, a very subtle difference in the way that both sides of the area are made. Obviously, of course, though, the newer area is also made with a little bit more experience and quite a while later, and with a newer version of the game, so that plays along a little bit as well. Also, this recording is so much better when it's not paused with all the people just walking around, which is something I probably shouldn't talk about, but I think it works a lot better just playing it. Also, the trees swaying is absolutely amazing. But yeah, that's all about that. I also did want to come back to some of the other parts of the park, as you just saw, to just add a couple new things in, some of those new planters, and those new bushes which actually got put into the game, which are really versatile, like some of those smaller things which you can dress up the smaller parts of your park a little bit more and add some extra detailing. And so I also really wanted to just get back to the older areas of the park and add that a little bit more. Now, coming to the station of the log flume, it's a pretty simple design. I actually wanted to lay off using the red roofs because it's a very overused thing at this point, and I felt it would be a little nicer perhaps to go with a more Greek temple-like roof, which is maybe a little more boring and not as interesting of the building itself, but helps to differentiate, I feel, the station building from the rest of the scenery buildings. And I kind of wanted to avoid having every single building have the same red roof, so I just wanted to try something a little bit different with this roof, and also have that small overhang on the front there to make it not look like such a boxy building, because one of the biggest pitfalls I find with stations is make them complete rectangles, which can be somewhat interesting, but I generally find it's much more interesting to look at a station with at least some parts sticking out, or some more interaction with its environment, because one of the main reasons why I am so afraid of making rectangular stations is it's hard to place it in their general area, and just by having that small overhang and a small little part alongside the water there, I wanted to make it a little bit closer to the lake and to the rest of the ride as well. And also something about the topic of the roofs and things like that. Every single red roof, or nearly every single red roof for these buildings, has a slightly different shade of red. So there are some very different subtle differences in the tones of the colors, which isn't that big of a deal, but just also one of the things I wanted to do here, just to make the buildings look a little bit different, even though they have generally the same colors and the same details that are used to make them. And the same really goes for the walls and windows and other pieces, like pillars as well. There are some slightly different tones and shades of colors used in the buildings in that way too. And the last building I just wanted to have over here is actually going to be a functional building, unlike the other ones, at least at the moment. I may well give a function to the other buildings as well. Maybe just some small restaurants. It's kind of a shame I can't really dress them up as restaurants, not being able to use Shy Guys sets, because this is a vanilla park. But still, I might want to give some sort of function to some of these buildings, but I don't want to do it too much since I have a lot of buildings in the park at the moment, and I feel like realistically I shouldn't have stalls and things like that in every single building that I build, but it's something that I might also get back to in the future, because truth be told, there are quite some stalls to be used, and it's probably a lot more fun to at least have some more stalls than just having empty buildings all over the place. So I'll probably get back to that at some point in the future. I just want to make sure that the general layout of the area is done at this point, and can always get back to the little fiddling and tweaking some smaller things at some point in the future. But yeah, that is just about it for this episode, because I'm more or less running out of time-lapse to talk over here. So thank you guys for watching again, and I hope to see you next time.